The skies that had long been silent are about to roar again. After 5 long years of isolation, uncertainty, and geopolitical frost, India and China are finally reconnecting directly through the skies. And history will remember the city of Kolkata, the first Indian city to restore these long-awaited direct flights to China. On October 26th, IndiGo's inaugural service to Guangzhou will take off, not just as a plane cutting through the clouds, but as a symbol of changing equations, shifting power dynamics, and a cautious yet significant thaw in one of the most complex bilateral relationships in the modern world. Imagine the scene, the first boarding call, the flashing cameras at Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose International Airport. Passengers lining up with mixed emotions, some excited, some anxious, many overwhelmed by the moment. For 5 years, these air routes were shut, frozen in the fog of a global pandemic, hardened further by border tensions and suspicion. Families were separated, businesses disrupted, students stranded, and travelers forced into exhausting detours through Hong Kong, Bangkok, or Singapore. But now, with this single flight, that long, expensive, and draining detour is being cut short. A direct corridor between India and China is reopening. And it signals much more than tourism about trade, politics, culture, and the very balance of power in Asia. To understand why this resumption matters, let's rewind. For IndiGo, India's largest airline, this is a bold step into a sensitive zone. Launching the Kolkata-Guangzhou service is not just about filling seats. It's about positioning the airline as the pioneer that dared to relink 2 of Asia's biggest economies. The service begins with 3 flights a week, but insiders suggest that if demand surges, frequencies could increase. Who will benefit? Thousands of Indian students who had been locked out of their Chinese universities since 2020 are finally finding a lifeline. Parents in India who spent sleepless nights worrying about their children's careers can now breathe easier. Business delegations, entrepreneurs, and traders, especially in sectors like pharmaceuticals, IT, textiles, and electronics, will once again have direct access to the vast Chinese market. And for China, too, the benefits are obvious. Its manufacturing hubs desperately need skilled labor, research, collaboration, and investment flows, much of which was disrupted when flights were suspended. Reopening the skies is therefore a win-win, at least on the economic front. But let's not forget, behind the excitement lies a deep undercurrent of geopolitics. Every seat booked on that Kolkata-Guangzhou flight carries with it questions about trust, security, and long-term strategy. Can India afford to deepen people-to-people ties with China when the 2 armies still face off across a disputed border? Is this aviation thaw a sign of a broader diplomatic reset, or is it merely a transactional move driven by necessity? The answer lies somewhere in between. For India, resuming direct flights is not a concession, it's a calculated balancing act. By opening a single corridor through Kolkata, India signals that while it remains cautious, it is not closing the door completely. For China, agreeing to this reopening is also a message that despite tensions, it too recognizes the need for connectivity with India, particularly in a world where supply chains and global trade are shifting rapidly. Now, picture the passengers themselves. On board that inaugural flight will be students clutching admission letters, families carrying gifts for loved ones, and business leaders armed with contracts and proposals. Each one represents a story of resilience. It's a reminder that diplomacy is not just about leaders shaking hands. It's about ordinary people trying to rebuild the threads of connection after years of disruption. One can almost imagine the emotional scenes. A mother waving goodbye to her son, who heading back to a medical university in Guangzhou, or a young entrepreneur dreaming of tapping into China's consumer market. For them, this flight is not politics, it's hope. Yet this cautious optimism must be seen in the broader context of India-China relations. Both nations remain locked in competition for regional influence, economic dominance, and strategic security. Trade between the 2 countries, despite tensions, continues to flourish, crossing $118 billion in 2024, though heavily tilted in China's favor. India's dependence on Chinese Ports from electronics to pharmaceuticals remains a concern for policymakers in New Delhi. On the other hand, China sees India as both a competitor and a potential partner in reshaping global trade flows, especially at a time when the West is increasingly wary of Beijing. So, the resumption of flights, while positive, does not erase these underlying frictions. Instead, it creates a space for dialogue, a corridor of engagement where people-to-people ties can perhaps soften hardened positions. From a geopolitical standpoint, this development also places India in a unique spot. The United States, Japan, and Australia, India's partners in the Quad, are closely watching how New Delhi manages its relations with Beijing. Resuming direct flights may be seen by some as a softening of stance, but India has carefully framed it as a practical necessity, not a political endorsement. By using Kolkata rather than Delhi or Mumbai, India is sending a nuanced message. We are reopening links, but on our terms, cautiously and selectively. For China, the optics are equally important. It can showcase this move as evidence that its diplomatic isolation is not total, that even a rival like India sees value in engagement. For Beijing, the resumption of flights serves its larger narrative of restoring global connectivity post-COVID and reasserting its role as Asia's central hub. The symbolism of Guangzhou is no accident either. Known as the Southern Gateway of China, Guangzhou has been a hub of trade for centuries, connecting China with South Asia, Southeast Asia, and beyond. For an Indian city like Kolkata, historically tied to the Bay of Bengal trade routes, this pairing is almost poetic, a revival of old connections in a new geopolitical age. Economically, the timing couldn't be more critical. India's economy is booming, projected to be the fastest-growing major economy in the world. Its aviation sector is expanding rapidly, with IndiGo, Air India, and others placing record aircraft orders. Meanwhile, China's economy is slowing, grappling with a property crisis, weakening exports, and an aging population. In this scenario, connectivity with India becomes valuable for Beijing, not just for students and tourists, but for trade, investment, and supply chains. Thus, the Kolkata-Guangzhou flight becomes more than just a route. It becomes a small but significant piece of the larger economic puzzle. But let's also acknowledge the challenges. Security agencies in India will be vigilant, monitoring the passenger flows and the nature of exchanges. Any misstep at the border, any fresh skirmish in Ladakh, could once again freeze the skies. That's the fragility of this moment. It's a cautious restart, not a full reset. Both governments know this, and both are testing the waters carefully. For now, though, optimism outweighs suspicion. The return of flights is being celebrated by chambers of commerce, travel agencies, and student associations. Social media is already buzzing with anticipation hashtags like hashtag #IndiaChinaFlights, hashtag KOLKATA Guangzhou, and hashtag Skies Reopen are trending, reflecting both excitement and curiosity. For Kolkata itself, this move is a boost to its image. Once a proud global city, Kolkata has often been overshadowed by Delhi, Mumbai, and Bengaluru in recent decades. But with this flight, it reclaims some of its lost glory as India's eastern bridge to Asia. Local businesses, hotels, and trade associations are already preparing for the influx. Imagine the ripple effects. More travelers passing through the city, more cultural exchange, more visibility on the global map. For a city rich in history, culture, and resilience, becoming the first Indian gateway to China again is no small achievement. As we look ahead, the question remains, will this single flight be the spark that lights a larger revival of India-China aviation ties? Will we soon see direct services from Delhi to Beijing, Mumbai to Shanghai, or Bengaluru to Shenzhen? Or will this remain a cautious experiment, limited to a few weekly connections? Much will depend on how both governments manage their fragile relationship. If peace holds at the border, if dialogue continues, and if trade keeps booming, the skies could truly reopen in full. If not, Kolkata's historic first flight could remain a lone bright spot in an otherwise stormy chapter. What we are witnessing, then, is history in the making. The return of direct flights may appear routine in the world of aviation, but in the context of India-China ties, it is extraordinary. It's about more than tickets and schedules. It's about trust, resilience, and the delicate dance of diplomacy. As the IndiGo aircraft lifts off from Kolkata on October 26th, carrying with it passengers' dreams, and perhaps even cautious hope, it will carve a path through the clouds that were once sealed shut. And every eye will be watching, not just in India and China, but across the world, to see whether this corridor remains open or whether storm clouds return. So when the wheels leave the ground and the engines roar, remember, this is not just a flight. It's a signal, a story, and perhaps the beginning of a new chapter in the long, complicated saga of India and China. The skies may have been closed for 5 years, but now they are reopening. And with them, possibilities too are taking flight.